Hi Sarah, thank you for joining me on this. It's the first of like a series of chats that I'm doing with self-care entrepreneurs and people that are in the wellness industry. And I wanted to invite you on to share a bit of your story, what you do, and what we'll go into the questions in a bit, but what self-love means to you. So if you want to give a little intro, over to
Sure.
you.
Thanks so much for having me. I love these types of conversations. I think self-love is something that everyone really needs to be looking at, more so than most subjects, actually. And it's something that for me has been a real personal journey. And when I look at the times of when I've really become the best version of myself, it's when I've been keeping 25% back and
Okay.
investing that back into myself. So my name's Sarah King. I've actually been in the corporate space for a very long time, 36 now. I started a recruitment agency when I was 23. I
Wow.
very much wanted to go into a kind of a business for myself for, I guess, freedom. It's the way that I'm wired, and I wanted to have choices and experience from a very early age. I learn best by really being in the thick of it, and my,
Yeah.
my learning style is through experience. Um,
Mm.
as much as I loved school, and I wasn't as interested in the kind of academic route as I was of being in like pure business. So I knew that from a very young age. And I then went into the people and culture space. I actually moved over to Australia for a number of years. I've
Oh,
lived in a few
wow.
different countries,
Yeah.
and just took the decision to kind of go along the route of what I felt most comfortable in, and that was in the space of people. So the people, culture, talent space. And I was lucky enough to get a few different gigs, and through the people and networks that I've created. So I was chief people officer for a fintech crypto business, for the last kind of 6 years. I'm now in a interesting kind of gardening leave, hold period before I step up to my kind of my next,
Mm.
which will be a chief of staff role in a similar space. So um, within this time, I've taken on a coaching course, hence why I was like really open to speaking to you, because there's a lot that I've learned about myself in that
Fantastic.
time that you can't really learn from experience, and it's more so learning from sitting still and listening to yourself in the periods of kind of solitude and silence. And there's been a forced pause, and I think I've learned a lot. I'm sure we can kind of like get into that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Hence why I wanted to kind of help and share in any way I could with
Yeah.
some of the questions that you put forward to me.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you're kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, free spirit, like you said. And I think sometimes that's the hardest kind of personality to fight for your own space. The individualist kind of, I need me to be able to live how I want to live. But that can sometimes come at a price because it's hard to manifest it all the time. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's such a great point. And when the more I've kind of like tapped into myself and unraveled myself, there are parts of me that I wouldn't want to change and would be very difficult to. So it's kind of like enhancing those parts of me rather than trying to look to force to fit in different places that just aren't going to elevate me, make me happy, make my soul happy, make me light up. So it's kind of just yeah, elevating the parts and working on the parts of who I truly am and my kind of like authenticity, which yeah, are quite
Yeah.
unique. But if you really are guided by your authenticity, I don't think you can go far wrong.
Exactly. I love that. So starting a business, that's and growing it and it being successful, that's quite something. Is that slightly like away from self-love, but is that how your drive kind of manifests itself by doing, you said business is important to you, but what kind of what's the word? Gratification do you get? Like what's the buzz? What's the pull for
Mm.
you?
It's a great question. And I feel like a lot of people that are running podcasts for people that are high achievers, ambitious, are all trying to find the kind of the formula. And I think it's a very personal and unique story, to every individual. I was someone that came from a, I want to be like respectful of it because it's who I am now that matters. But I drew a lot from the experiences I had as a child. And for me to be financially stable was to be free and to make my own choices in an area where I felt quite confined, and in an environment that was going against my authenticity and against I'm not very good with structures,
Mm.
with authority, with being told to do something the way others have done it. I need to figure that out for myself. So
Yeah.
I found that, really kind of taking the risk and just going out by myself, the more I compounded on that, the more freedom I had. So that was my story. And I think to see something grow and to be successful for what success meant for me, and I knew that quite early on. It was the right path. There was definitely periods where I had I'd started a recruitment business. I didn't go to university, and I hadn't traveled, and a lot of my friends had.
Yeah.
And I kind of got to a point where I was like, whoa, like I know this is who I am, but like, is this going to be my life forever? Like, am I going to jeopardize my freedom and exploring and kind of having adventures? So I decided to go traveling. I bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok, and I didn't come back
Oh,
for 5 years. I
oh,
moved to other
wow.
places in that time, and just when you have that belief in yourself, I'll find a way and I'll figure it out. I was young enough to do that at that time. I'm not saying it wasn't difficult in parts, but I just kind of locked into the end result and just focused on vision, having that vision of freedom, experience, of adventures. And that was something that I was lucky enough to kind of experience in my early to kind of late 20s as
Yeah.
well.
Amazing. 5 years. Going for a little while and not returning for 5 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I learned so much about myself then. Like when I was younger, I had a extreme, I would say, anxiety disorder, which meant that I
Mm.
didn't want to like kind of travel far, and I only felt comfortable in certain spaces. So again, it was like being encouraged and bravery. And I remember saying to myself, if I go here for 6 months and do this for 6 months, I'll be really proud of myself. And actually, I was away, for 5 years, and it's I don't know. I have this weird thing of like, if I don't think I can do it, like I want to do it more. So like
Yeah. A
stepping into,
challenge. Yeah.
stepping into courage, and
Yeah.
that served me pretty well too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you kind of described is what I see as the core of self-love. It's putting your needs first, your dreams, um, and actually honoring yourself. You found out what type of person you are, and if you're not living that, it's kind of you get messed up. So it's
yeah,
like,
no, I often sorry.
no, go.
No, I often say to people, if I'm coaching, or I very much was like company therapist, I guess, for the roles that I've been in, when you're in that HR people space, you're coming in into contact with people with all of their experiences and their choices and their problems. And, you want to kind of you don't want to enable them, you want them to figure out their own answer. But I would often kind of loosely give advice to say, figure out what lights you up. And if you're really in tune with your body, and that's sometimes just sitting in silence and solitude and taking yourself away, your body would normally give you the answer about how you feel in certain situations. And I was, again, lucky enough to tap into that quite young. And I think that was going through difficult periods of like forcing myself to have to sit and look at pain, or
Mm.
or what wasn't in alignment and wasn't in balance. And actually, it's, if you're in the wrong environment, your body and your gut feel, and even the way that you look, your aura, your
Yeah.
energy, what you're emitting outwardly, it would probably be quite obvious and you would know.
Yeah.
But the difficulty is people have been in those spaces for so long that they don't know the difference of how it
Yeah.
feels to be lighter or free, or or to feel something different. So it's kind of asking those poignant questions to people, to have to ask those questions to themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is
Yeah. So
guided me.
like when in terms of like the visceral kind of effect, where you can you kind of talk about a time where you've noticed the change in you from when you're doing something that was against what was right for you, your body, your mind, your spirit, and then what difference you saw when you were doing what was right for you, what was
Yeah,
aligned.
yeah, it's a great question, and literally I can recall it, straight away. And
Yeah.
actually, that was more in a relationship capacity more than it was. I built foundations quite early in being able to leave the corporate world, if I didn't like a contract or a business, I think we're forced to believe that, you know, we need to stay in a company for as long as we can. It would look bad on our CV. We might not have
Yeah.
the right experience. But
Yeah.
actually, again, authentically, if that's not serving you, I would advise people against that. You know, if there's something that you're not in alignment with, I would be starting to look at what could be, or an out from that quite early on. And the situation you're speaking about, I was in a relationship that absolutely, like, physically, energetically, mentally just dimmed me. I'm quite a
Mm.
default positive person, and at the beginning there's lots of chemicals and chemistry and connections, and you know, and I don't hold any blame to this, but I could tell that my gut feeling, something was telling me something wasn't right. And in difficult relationships, I'm not using labels, I'm not using, you know, all this kind of like jargon and terminology that we hear about. It's more so, I just knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And my brain was trying to tell me it was, because that's, you know, the heart wants what the heart wants. You can almost kind of kid yourself. Some people would say gaslight, but you can also kid yourself and force yourself to thinking something different, because, you know, your codependency or your heart wants something different. But actually, how I felt when I left that person, I had to question every time I came away from a meeting, you know, staying with them. We were living together at some point. Anytime I broke away, I'd have to notice how I felt when I was with them and how I felt
Mm.
when I wasn't. And
Contrast.
also,
Yeah.
you have to listen to the people that love you the most, that, you know, you sometimes don't want to hear. But those people, one friend in particular that I'll just forever be grateful for, and just people that I was around that would comment on certain things, and how active my brain was in trying to understand and make sense of things. So yeah, they often say, you know, it's the pain of staying the same that outweighs kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
the pain of continuing. And that was like the moment that I couldn't go off anything else. My mind was telling me, my spirit was telling me. It was literally how my body felt, because
Yeah.
that is the most authentic feedback and response I
Exactly.
could ever work with. So I'd say that there were times that I broke my own heart to leave the situation, but I can say now categorically, you know, it's nearly 2 years out of it, it was the right decision. But that was the guide for me internally that helped to make that decision when the brain couldn't kind of compute what's going on.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah. So it's like that your could it be that your body was t speaking more loudly than your
yeah.
heart and your brain? That's when you decided this, I have to change. I have
I
to.
have to look at it. I have to
Yeah.
look at it. This isn't
Yeah.
going to go away, and this isn't peace.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's quite like those two words, freedom and peace go hand in hand. So if they're the word I don't like using the word alignment because it can mean so many things. But yeah, if you're not choosing the things that you want and there's a friction, then your body is going to react in a way to say, no, this is not happening. We're not gelling. The traits that we know bring us joy are healthy for us. And
Yeah, and I think, you know, they manifest physically and emotionally. So some people, you know, will have literal skin disorders because there's like a irritation of something internally that you know, manifests externally. It could be through mental health issues, it could be from your body. Sometimes I notice that physical work, you know, if people are workaholism, an accident may happen where it forces them to go into solitude. So like,
mm,
if you don't put the brakes on yourself, it's what I believe, like karmically or physically, something will manifest where the body will physically stop. So
yeah,
it's better to kind of catch it before.
yeah, before the tower falls and you've got no choice,
Yeah,
prevention instead of
yeah,
um so in terms of like self-love, what when I asked you to join me on this conversation, what did that kind of basically initiate in your mind of like this is
yeah.
what it means?
It was great to actually think about the blueprint of what I use, because I don't know whether I've ever written it down. It's been through my own experiences of what served me. And so the first thing I put was like being kind to myself. And I think that mentally I am quite kind to myself. And, you know, zooming out helps a lot when you're anxiety, like I said, from having an anxiety disorder at a young age when I didn't really have access to podcasts, self-help books, community groups, experiences. You have to just kind of figure it out yourself, and how you can create a spiral or a negative way of thinking is not being kind to yourself.
Mm.
So if you can make yourself feel terrible, you can make yourself feel great. And I chose to make myself feel great, and to really kind of like nurture that inner child and speak well to myself, especially when I woke up in the morning and when I went to sleep. So waking up in the morning was having, just, there's a great book that I use. It's called like the 5 minute gratitude journal, the five,
Yeah,
and you literally list down, 5 things or 3 things you're grateful for every day. And that's a really good anchor to come back to, when I look back at what I wrote this time last year, like it's
yeah,
almost like a portal into that place, and seeing the little things, even just like weirdly like this, I bought this new coffee cup like a couple of weeks ago and I'm just like obsessed with it. It cost me like £5, but actually having my coffee in the morning and sitting in a place and just taking time for myself is just something that I just compound those little moments over time. So
yeah,
being kind to myself internally in my mind, and I think that with the holistic approach, that kind of spills out into the body, looking after yourself, whether that be going out for a walk, connecting to nature, doing
yeah,
some stretching, meditation, exercise, how vigorously you want to do that, and also spiritually, meditation, making sure that you're having breaks of solitude and sleeping well, the things that will
mm,
kind of bring balance into your life. The second thing that I put down was like keeping 20. Some people are saying, oh, you should keep 10% for yourself. I would say for me it's probably more like 25% to 30%. I'm really big on that. I'm a very emotionally charged person. Energy for me when I'm in the corporate and people space, I'm around a lot of different energies, so
yeah,
my need for what I keep in my own cup is going to be higher than your average.
right,
So I'm an ambivert. If I'm doing something as an
yeah,
extrovert, doing it 110%, but then there will be a literal switch in my energy where I'm like, my battery's dead, like I need to go
yeah.
and have space to myself. So, keeping something for yourself and not seeing that as a selfish thing, like it's a need to show up to the best of your ability. You need to make sure that you're kind of reinvesting back into your pot and into your cup and into
Exactly,
yourself.
because you can't give from a space of depletion, and then
Yeah.
that just leads to disease basically. But can you give like an example of what
Sure.
you would talk to yourself in a kind way in comparison to when you know you've kind of been a bit
Yeah.
self-deprecating or, a bully to your in your own dialogue?
Yeah, I think it's because I've noticed it so much in the work that I've done with people that it's made me really be bigger on the way that I speak to myself, because it adds no benefit. So when people are kind of presenting themselves to me in a really difficult space, I can kind of see their brain turning against them and that inner voice. And okay, an example I would always speak to myself very kindly before I went to bed. I'd be quite conscious of what I'm listening, reading, watching before I go into bed, like go to bed. I think like subconscious is a powerful thing. And also when I wake up in the morning, like saying like having a gratitude journal or
Mm.
something that I can actually physically write down, look around me, no matter how big or small, there is something good that I can take out of every day. And I choose to kind of compound that than, um, where I might have a shame response to something, or said something I shouldn't have. What's the point of dwelling on those moments? And trust me,
Mm.
I have them. But that's a really good example of being kind to yourself. Like, are you spiraling on something you said to someone, or the message that you sent to someone, or the email that you sent to someone? Where's that going to get you? My mantra is always, as long as I'm moving 1% forward every day towards the light and not kind of the darker side, that's going to get me further to where I need to be. So
Yeah, that's really, really good. I wouldn't say like I hate using the word advice because people will
yeah,
take what resonates. But yeah, the not spiraling is is an act of kindness to yourself.
how
Taking yourself
beneficial
out.
is
Yeah,
it? It's
yeah,
where's that going to get you? There's
yeah,
everything positive in thinking and speaking positively, and there's not. It's like it's just completely negative to think any different. So
Yeah.
that's the path
Yeah.
I've kind of chosen for me.
Um, Carry on with your list.
My
Yeah,
list,
yeah.
great.
Thank
So
you.
connecting with nature, huge. Maybe not for this podcast, but I'm a huge believer in energy and astrology. And I know kind of the composition of myself. I'm very emotional. I'm high in the elements of like water. So I need to be very grounded and not having my phone, whether it's listening to music, not listening to music. I know that there is a baseline. If I've not slept, if I've been overworking, if I've been having a little bit more alcohol than I would normally, if I haven't been eating right, I mean, it's the recipe for like my emotional depletion. Like,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
just, firstly, it would always be have a great night's sleep because that has the best knock on effect to make great food choices, to want to do exercise, to be able to have energy. So that's like my baseline is sleep. And being another thing that I put actually it's the company that you keep, I think is so important. And again, noticing how you feel when you leave any interaction and almost like any space. Like if you're wired like me energetically, like I could literally feel the energy of a room. So, you know, look, it's a modern world, right? People are going to have problems. They're going to want to speak about those problems, but having a boundary or having something that you can pull yourself away from those, or even if you're being that person yourself, you know,
Yeah.
to kind of be aware of like, how do you feel when you're leaving interactions, when you get into bed that night, like energetically, how are you feeling? Was that a day that filled you up, or was that a day that took something from you? So
Yeah. Yeah.
self-awareness, I think, has just been, you know, the greatest indicator
Yeah.
uh, for
Can I
me.
just like touch on some of the things you said? Self-awareness to me is like intrinsic to self-love because if you where you've described like you're kind of astrological type or th those different aspects which I
Yeah.
think is fascinating. I love all that and the spiritual side and that could mean a whole load of stuff. But knowing that those elements of you, I think gives you the kind of recipe, the list of how to give yourself that self-love, that kindness, the self-awareness develops when you start looking at yourself.
Mhm.
It doesn't, you can't give yourself something if you don't know yourself. So
Mhm.
it's like buying a gift for a friend, you know what they like, what they don't like, what they're dreaming of, that kind of thing. If you're not asking yourself those questions, you're not going to
Mhm.
be able to gift yourself that
Mhm.
self-love. So I love that. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think, you know, it's always good to look at both parts of that. It's like the discovery and self awareness of yourself, but to also, you know, we're often, when you're in times of conflict or problems or, you know, of figuring out something difficult that's happening in your life. Like, well, I know that I used to move very quickly to blame. So
Mhm.
I'd think, oh, that person's doing that, that person's doing that. And actually, I think what's really helped me to really uncover the onion that is me is actually holding the mirror up at myself and
Yeah.
being like, what could I have done different? What responsibility can I take for that situation? So it's the discovery of you, but also for all of like your shadow parts as well, all of the
Yeah.
shit parts that you know that we want to try and like project or blame onto other people. I think that's where the gold has been for me.
Yeah.
Is
I'm so glad you said that because
yeah.
that's how I going back to like if you don't know yourself, you can't be the best version of yourself. You can't oops, something just popped up. So you can't deliver the goods without knowing yourself, and that can be the uncomfortable journey. That can be, like you said, the mirror facing your shadow self, the ugly parts, the parts that where you've hurt other people and where you blame people. That's the kind of golden nugget. We've said that a few times, but of
Mm,
self-awareness, and that leads to self-love because if you're not treating yourself with the awareness of like, well, I don't make good decisions sometimes, or I'm not always the best version of me, or I might have done stuff to hurt people. If you're not addressing those things, you're not looking at your whole self. So it's kind of like you have to look at the whole
yeah.
picture.
Do you know, you've asked for like specific examples, and when I was thinking about the list, I was like, oh, I must say this because this has been a new one for me over the last, I'd say, year. With me being an emotional and sensitive person, my default is to take things personally, I've only just discovered that there are really dark people in this world, and like that their only kind of want is to do bad to people because where they're at for themselves. But actually, something that has really helped me is having space between an emotional reaction to something
Mm.
and actually doing something. So, when, say, a problem arises, whether that be in friendships, relationships, work, my default would be self-protection, defensiveness, and to react. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, me allowing some space, whether to sleep on it, to put my phone away and to go for a walk, to and I mean that, like, sometimes speaking to a friend has not helped because it's kind
Yeah.
of like charged
Yeah.
the energy even more.
Yeah.
Taking space has really helped me in the way that I'm wired. I'm not saying it works for everybody. Some people it can lead into avoidance, but for me, I'm quite a reactive person. So that's like definitely been, something that is an example that I can share and say that absolutely that has helped me,
Yeah,
9
you
out
mentioned
of 10.
solitude.
Yeah,
Yeah, being an ambivert of knowing the line where you need to step back and just do nothing
yeah,
to recharge. Yeah,
yeah.
great. There was another question? Was there another question that we had, or I can't remember.
Let's have a look. You also said,
Mm, I think what's one thing you need more of from yourself? What's one thing that you
yeah.
still see you could include?
So the being kind to yourself, the flip side of that I do default into is I'm quite hard on myself in achieving. I can
Mm.
default into like perfectionism. And because I didn't go to university and I didn't study in a way that others did, and because I learned through experience, I have this like imposter that is like, oh, because other people have done it a certain way, that's how it needs to be done, and there's no other way. And actually, going through the process of the the kind of the next client and job that I'm going into, the person that I'm about to work with, I know really believes in me, and I don't know where this doubt comes from. But it's to kind of again zoom out and to remind myself of where I've got to based on the foundation and blueprint of what's worked for me, and it goes back to authenticity. So I'm not like anyone else. That's my power, as
Mm.
like cringy as that is. But like I've found and tried and tested a way that works for me, and that doesn't have to suit everybody. And just that's the way that I can remind myself. So not being too hard on myself. And I think also just having a goal and celebrating the moments of winning, because you can easily kind of go, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it's like, hang on a minute, Sarah, like look where you're at, look what you've achieved, look where you wished and dreamed about the things that you have now. Chill, everything
Yeah.
kind of flies past so quickly. So yeah, I'd say like being hard on myself on the achieving side. I guess that comes from a wound, right?
Yeah, I think so. We're like your three things: kindness, self-awareness, and not being hard on yourself. But I think combining those all three together, it's the self-awareness that stands out the most. Because if
Yeah, for sure.
it's once you got to that point, whether you've studied or anything, it's life experience that gives you that, I think.
Mm.
Um, is there like one extra nugget that you could share of what in terms of your business, your initiative, and what you're going to be doing the Willow project, like how would you, if someone came to you and said, I can't be nice to myself, I don't know how to be kind to myself because of what life's thrown at them or who they have around them, how would you,
Yeah,
what little snippet would you give?
yeah, for sure. So I think it goes back to two things came to mind. One, we're all flawed. And I think that kind of, shame is brought to light in rooms of other people sharing stories of shame, like or darkness. We are we're all different, but we're similar in many ways, and that is normally through like the darkness of ourselves. So always remembering that there's probably people in the room that you're sitting in that also are not being that kind to themselves in one area of their life. And secondly, to what would be realistic, and this is like this is gold for me, and I mentioned it earlier, as long as you're kind of like compounding the 1%. Because for someone that's presenting themselves to me or coming to me in that kind of like distress, nothing really goes in, like everything feels too far-fetched or
Mm.
too difficult, and
Yeah,
very defeatist, and also like depression, that's where that comes from, is not being able to, it's like being depressed. And actually, just what's the one thing that you can do today that's moving more towards the light than it is the darkness? And that might be for some people brushing their teeth, it might be to
yeah,
stand up and pitch in front of thousands of people. Like, the feelings are the same, the situations are just different. So, what is realistic? In many 12-step programs, working with addiction, it's just for today I will not drink, just for today I will not take drugs, just for today I will not. That's a realistic kind of bubble of what in this moment can I do that would be choosing to be kind to myself. And that kind of eliminates the overpowering overwhelm of what is unrealistic to them. If they're saying
mm,
things like I can't or I won't, I've never been able to, it's like, well, what can you do? What would be the
mm,
positive choice in this moment? And over time, that compounded, that's that literally results into the person you become through all of the small decisions. So I believe life is lived in the detail of those 1%, and that's
yeah,
who really does form you as a person.
yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. This has been really good, and I hope it helps people that are listening. I was going to say something and it's gone from my mind, which is really annoying. Um, So, in terms of self-love, I think the analogy that you used of moving from the light to the dark, that's what stood out the most for me, and I love that. And I think I would like to leave it there of like if you're feeling that you need something, look to the light and move yourself away from the dark in that moment, in that second, and think of what one thing can you do to move
Mm.
yourself towards the light, and that's
And,
beautiful.
yeah, and I think it brings you back into your body to know
Yeah.
how that feels. And the more that we're in tune with ourselves, the more we can make the right decisions. And I know you mentioned at the beginning of this, is there something that I can kind of guide people to in the work that I'm doing? And um, I'm looking to kind of be bridging the gap about kind of being in the corporate space and being a coach that is somewhat spiritual and energy driven, as well as being a modern kind of exec leadership coach. So the brand and business I work for is the Willow Project. The website's just under construction at the moment, but will be live in the next couple of months. And you'll be able to like find me on LinkedIn, Sarah King. And if there was if anyone wanted to reach out or if anything that I've spoken about, have my email as well as sarah@thewillowproject.co.uk. So I'm sure you can like share that. But yeah, it's real kind of, it's been great actually to actually verbalize it. I'm like, God, maybe I do know some stuff.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant. I mean, what
Well,
you're
thanks
doing, what
so
you're
much.
moving towards sounds amazing and it's definitely needed. And I think, yeah, you're gonna kill it.
Thanks so much.
So,
Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. I'm gonna end this because we've got like 1 minute left, but then I'll call you and we
Great.
can talk again. But thank you very much, Sarah King, and
Thank you.
I'll add your
Thanks
link
so much.
to this video. All right, take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.